is the show where NFL legends come to tell their stories. This is the show where we spotlight what's good in the world of sports. This is also the show where we appreciate the NFL Alumni Association and the Gridiron Greats. For this is Thursday Night Tailgate with your hosts, Chris Mascaro and Bob Lazzari. Guys, it's finally tonight. I've waited all day. Have a good time and take it away.
Good evening, folks, and welcome to another edition of Thursday Night Tailgate, where your favorite NFL legends live. I'm Chris Mascaro. My partner is Bob Lazzari, and we're ready to kick off week number 7 of the 2018 NFL season with you. And we're going to do it with another great lineup of guests who will be sharing their stories and their insights with us, plus our 5-star picks of the week with Tony Collins, and our favorite segment of the show, our Spotlight on the Positive, that reminds all of us that the majority of the current players and the NFL alumni players are out there doing great things in their communities. Through their foundations, many of them have started up foundations doing great things, like I say, in their communities, and are getting involved with volunteer programs. So many wonderful stories that we have every single week. And like I say, that's our favorite segment of the show, and we hope you guys enjoyed it as much as we do. Bob, good evening. How are you, my friend?
Hello, Chris. How are you, sir?
I'm fantastic. Thank you. So, Bob, as we look out into what's been going on around the league over the last week or so, when you look at the standings, 8 teams in the NFC with 3 wins, 5 more in the AFC with 3 wins. So you got 13 of the 32 teams, or nearly half of the league at 500 or thereabouts. Got a couple of teams with some ties in there, but it appears like the NFL is getting exactly what it wants, Bob: parity. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm sure you'll probably agree, Chris. I don't remember a time when the parity was this much. And we're not even including a team like Atlanta, who's 2-4, who both of us expected a lot more of. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's what the league wants. There are teams that we thought that are good, that are still good, but I think everyone thought New England might be a little bit better than 4-2. Probably people didn't think Cincinnati would be 4-2. I mean, there are a lot of surprises, but there's a lot of parity, and I guess it goes to show you, Chris. Maybe it's reflected in our expert picks, but I guess it's reflective of the impossibility of predicting these games, and it's not a cliche. Any team can beat any other team on any day this year in the NFL.
Yeah, I tell you, Bob, it really jumped out at me as I was looking through the standings, come Tuesday morning, kind of looking back at what happened over the weekend and, kind of sort of taking all of that in and looking at the standing, like, wow, look at all the teams that are 3-3. You got a couple of 3-2-1s in there. To your point about the Falcons, you got some teams 2-4, but so many teams bunched up right around that 500 number. Not a lot of teams separating themselves, particularly outside of the Rams over in the NFC. So, I think it's exactly what Roger Goodell and the NFL would want. We got everybody still right in the thick of things, and we may have a division like the NFC East that ends up being a 9-7 winner, within that division, and so many teams sort of fighting it out going into the last couple of weeks of the season, which is what the league wants, right? It wants all of its fan bases to be excited, still feeling good about themselves, still feeling like their team has an opportunity as you get into, weeks 15, 16, and 17, and we're certainly on pace for that.
It's a good point, Chris. I think the league, exactly what you said, everybody's going to watch a game between, Green Bay and New England or whatever, but they want people watching those games, like your Cleveland versus Detroit, where it's just for the football fan out there. So many people in the past, they turn off a game because it's a mismatch. You can't say that anymore, and in that respect, the league has to like that.
Yes, they do. All right, so on to tonight. Who's going to be joining us here on this week on Thursday Night Tailgate? Well, our first guest is going to be former Broncos Giants and Falcons head coach Dan Reeves. Bob, it's always great having Coach as part of the show. Really looking forward to getting his thoughts on really all three of the former teams that he coached, plus maybe some ideas on the Cowboys, who he played for back in the early 70s, and even his alma mater, the University of South Carolina. But always a thrill when Coach joins the show, Bob.
Oh, it's an honor, Chris. It's a fascinating guy because, as you say, we can talk about his playing career where he was an incredibly gifted athlete that goes under the radar. And, of course, his coaching career where he had, I think, 9 or 10 double-digit win seasons. Great coach, former great player. And as you know, nobody has a bad word to say about that man. He's well-respected.
Yes, he is, and what a wonderful guy he's been to us over the years and coming back, and I believe this is going to be about his 6th visit with us, so very honored that he'll join us about 10 minutes from now. Following him, we're going to be joined by former Patriots running back Tony Collins. We'll go through our 5-star picks of the week for Week 7 in the NFL. We'll do that at the bottom of this half hour. Following Tony, we're going to get a return visit from former LSU and Miami Dolphins defensive back Liffort Hobley. And Bob, want to get his perspective on what's going on at his alma mater, LSU, coming off a huge win over previously second-ranked Georgia this past Saturday. They've got Alabama coming up in a couple of weeks. That game also, just like the Georgia one, is going to be in Death Valley. So eager to get Liffort's thoughts on they're going to be up for that. Getting Alabama coming in there. Alabama is just on an unbelievable roll. It seems like they're steamrolling everybody, but they may not have had an opponent as good as LSU. That's what Georgia found out, that their schedule, they didn't have anybody on it as tough as LSU is, particularly in Death Valley. So we're looking forward to getting his thoughts. But Liffort's been a good friend and glad to have him back on the show with us tonight.
Great guy to talk to about Louisiana football. Chris played high school ball there, as you know, college ball. He was born there and had a great career in the NFL. Good 7-year solid career, and always talks to us in a very scholarly fashion. We like the guy.
Yes, we do. He'll join us about 45 minutes from now. Then we'll kick off hour number 2 with a return visit from Michigan State Packers and Colts offensive lineman Tony Mandarich. And Bob, Tony is an amazing man with an amazing story, from being an All-American lineman to the number 2 overall pick in '89 to, being ridiculed later on as being a bust, to steroid and painkiller addiction, to years in rehab, and then 3 years of a successful comeback with the Colts, which most people don't remember. And now he's a tremendous photographer. Folks, I highly encourage you, go online to TonyMandarich.com and see his stuff. It's absolutely spectacular. But Bob, what a story Tony's life has been.
Yeah, you could make a movie on it, Chris. Again, and you remember, we go back remembering him as one of the highest touted offensive linemen I ever remember. This was a guy back in the day, Chris, 315 pounds that could run a 40 in about 3.6. I mean, 4.6. I mean, it was just scary to watch how good he was. Certain things caused him not to have the career he didn't want, but he put things together. And like you said, has a very good career out of football now, and obviously can do a lot talking to young people and et cetera. And we'll get more to that when we talk to him.
Yeah, great comeback story and a wonderful motivational speaker as well. Tony's going to be with us about an hour from now. And then we'll round out tonight's show with a visit from Carmen Fanzone. And Carmen played for the Red Sox and the Cubs back in the early 1970s. And Bob, like you mentioned about Carmen last week, an accomplished jazz musician playing the flugelhorn. So thanks to you for bringing him over from the TV side. Really looking forward to hearing his stories.
He's a part of my youth, Chris. I grew up watching those Cub games, playing the Mets on WOR. And, of course, all the games at Wrigley were played during a day. And I remember Carmen Fanzone, the guy that played the national anthem on his trumpet back then. He was like a cult hero. And, then I followed him throughout his career. And it's funny how things come full circle. Later in life, I had a chance to talk to him, have him on various shows. He's become a very good friend, and can talk about his wife, who was a Grammy Award winner, too. It's a fascinating story.
Yeah, looking forward to having him on the show with us. He'll join us about 90 minutes from now. So there you go, folks. Another exciting night on tap for you here on Thursday Night Tailgate. So sit back, relax. Let us take your mind off everything else going on in your life for the next couple of hours. And, folks, as you know, we are brought to you by the great folks over at the Louisville Slugger Museum and Factory, the Salt Creek Golf Retreat up in beautiful Nashville, Indiana. Our partners at the NFL Alumni Association and Mike Ditka's organization, the Gridiron Greats, who we love very much. Please go online and check them out at gridirongreats.org. Also check out our newest TNT guest Hall of Famer is former Houston Oilers quarterback Dan Pastorini and his company, DP Quality Foods. Dan has a lineup of award-winning spices that you're going to love. Go online to DP Quality Foods. I'm telling you, it's absolutely fantastic.
It's time for another edition of Bob's Take. So, Bob, tell us, what's on your mind tonight?
All right, let's get into this week's edition of Bob's Take. And, Bob, I want to start by getting your thoughts on the latest Vontaze Burfict incident. We saw him give a nice forearm shiver to Antonio Brown's head as he was making a tackle or jumping in on a tackle. Actually, not only did he hit Antonio Brown, he also caught a clip of one of his teammates as well. But, Bob, I don't know, how many times does this guy need to try to intentionally hurt someone before the league finally steps in a more permanent way? They keep preaching safety and making, the defense, you can barely touch a quarterback anymore. Or someone runs across the middle, and if a guy even gets hit hard, a flag comes out. If this guy goes headhunting game after game, he goes down low on quarterbacks trying to take out guys' knees. He's clearly bad for the game. So what's your take on the Vontaze Burfict situation, Bob?
Well, you hit it. You made some great points there, Chris. First of all, I have no idea how the guy is still playing. And last week, and I must have hit home with you against the Steelers. I mean, that was... I think it went under the radar. It's one of the worst things he's done because if you look at the replays, Chris, it went right toward the guy's head. The guy was defenseless at the time. He was almost down, and Brown was feeling a little crazy after that play for a while. Incredibly cheap shot, but it's the things leading up to this, Chris. He says there's a lot of bad blood between the two teams, as we know, et cetera, et cetera. But shame on guys like Marvin Lewis who've kind of defended him over the years. That's the people that really are probably keeping this thing going. He always deflects it off Burfict and he says, let's look at what some of the other guys are doing, while Burfict continues to do these things. And like you said, Chris, this is a time of history where we know so much about the head injuries, and we're trying to make it a little cleaner. They're actually policing it a little too much, et cetera. But this guy obviously doesn't even fit into that category. It's a pretty disgraceful thing, Chris. I am just at the point now where I just hope somebody doesn't get incredibly hurt by this guy's continued shenanigans. I think it's a disgrace, and I know you feel the same. You've been on this for years.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at this guy's history, right? Now, between salary that he's forfeited due to suspensions and fines, he's given up $4 million, right, because of his actions. And he's been doing this sort of thing, Bob, since high school. Go out there, and I encourage everyone, go Google, Vontaze Burfict, and you're going to see stuff where he was intentionally diving at kids' legs when he was in high school. So clearly, fines are not getting through to this guy because of the $4 million, right? And this continues to happen over and over and over again. He doesn't get it. So my shame is on, the commissioner and Troy Vincent for not doing something about this guy. To your point, Bob, before long, this guy's going to do something permanent to somebody. He's going to take somebody out like he almost did to Antonio Brown, a couple of years ago in the playoff game, where he almost decapitated the guy. I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous. Shame on the NFL. Shame on Marvin Lewis for not getting this guy out of the game. He doesn't belong playing. He doesn't get it. Next, Bob, I want to get your take on Pat Shurmur's job with the Giants. We keep thinking, and you've mentioned this as we've gone through some of our picks, surely they can't lose again. Surely the Giants aren't going to go 1-4. Surely they're not going to go 1-5. Yet here we are. Do you think his job is in any jeopardy? He's only 6 games in, but where do you think his job is, and where do you think the Giants are at right now? What's your take?
Well, you got a kind of feeling this week listening to Mara, the owner, Chris, come out, and he's kind of disgusted at the start, obviously. He's kind of disgusted at Odell Beckham. I mean, if you gave that guy a boatload of money like they did, Chris, and just to hear his mouth all the time, it gets old up here because it's front page material, and it gets totally old. But when he brought Shurmur in here, I was under the impression, I'm sure he was too, that it would be a much better atmosphere last year it was just not a good atmosphere. They thought that would be totally changed. Well, you still have, I guess it all comes down to winning, Chris. Winning, if they were 5-1, I mean, it would be the best thing since sliced bread here, and you wouldn't hear anything, and Beckham wouldn't be talking, but it's a domino effect, and I don't know how short of a leash she's on, Chris. You have some weapons like Barkley and Beckham, and Manning still is at his advanced age. You're giving him the weapons. I mean, they expected at least to be 3-3 team by this time. 1-5 is not going to cut it. So if they go 4-12 this year, he may be on a one more year leash. And if he doesn't get above 500 or much better, make the playoffs next year, I'm sure they'll be looking again for a new coach.
There you go, folks. That's this week's edition of Bob's Take. And Bob, before we move on, you continue to do great stuff by putting more and more interviews up on your Monday Night Sports 14 YouTube channel. Talk about some of the more recent things you've added.
Yeah, people can check that out if they go to YouTube and type in, search Monday Night Sports 14, all one word, and you'll be able to catch a lot of the ones, especially now during football season. Earlier this evening on Twitter, Chris, I posted one that we did on the TV side with Don Horn. You and I have been lucky to have him on this show. Very fun guy who played with all those great Packer teams. So, check that out on Twitter. Or, again, it's on the website as well, and I appreciate the shout-out.
Absolutely. And here on TNT, we are sponsored by the Louisville Slugger Museum and Factory. And, folks, if you love the game of baseball, you've got to go check out the Louisville Slugger Museum and Factory. They were inducted into the TripAdvisor Certificate of Excellence Hall of Fame. And the museum is such a wonderful experience for everybody in your family because you get to go in there and walk their live production line and see some of the 1.8 million bats that they make every year. Been doing it now for 134 years. Don't miss the bat vault when you're in there because you can hold actual game-used bats. So some of the game's greatest legends, the Hank Aaron's and the Ted Williams, my hero growing up, Willie Stargell. To find out more information about the museum and to book your visit, go online to sluggermuseum.com. All right, now back in making his sixth appearance with us here on Thursday Night Tailgate is former head coach Dan Reeves. Let me remind you about Coach's background. He was born in Rome, Georgia, grew up in Americus, Georgia, where he played football, baseball, and basketball in high school. He played his college ball at the University of South Carolina, where he was a 3-year letterman, setting several records as a quarterback. And he also played right field on their baseball team. When he left South Carolina, he was their all-time leading passer. He was inducted into the Gamecocks Hall of Fame back in 1977 and the South Carolina Athletic Hall of Fame back in 2006. Somehow he was an undrafted free agent signed by the Dallas Cowboys in 1965. But he also got offers from the San Diego Chargers of the AFL and my hometown Pittsburgh Pirates to play baseball for them. Opted to play running back for the Cowboys from 1965 to 1972. And over the course of his playing career, he rushed for nearly 2,000 yards and he scored 25 touchdowns, added nearly 1,700 more receiving yards and 17 receiving touchdowns. He was a part of the Cowboys' 1971 Super Bowl championship team, went on to become one of the greatest head coaches in the history of the NFL with the Broncos, Giants, and Falcons. Teams to a 190, 165, and 2 record and 14 Super Bowl appearances. He's been a wonderful friend of the show, and we're very honored that he is back with us again tonight on Thursday Night Tailgate. Hey, Coach, Chris and Bob here. Thanks for coming back on the show.
Welcome, Coach.
Well, man, great day. You went way back there. I couldn't even remember all that stuff. That's a long time ago. It goes by quick, but that's a long time ago. No, it's great to be on with y'all. I always enjoy it.
Well, we appreciate you, Coach. And I want to start our time with you tonight by getting your thoughts on your alma mater, South Carolina. I think people thought that, this could be a team that could contend this year in the SEC East Division. Started out the season ranked in the top 25, but some unfortunate losses, 3 now, and they're still looking at Florida and Clemson coming up on the schedule. How do you feel about where their program is at and the direction they're going in?
Well, I think it's headed in the right direction. I think they're doing a good job. The key to everything is recruiting, in college football, and certainly, being in South Carolina and competing against Clemson the way Dabo has been doing there at Clemson is very difficult to overcome that. But, I think they're headed in the right direction. And I'm sure they're disappointed as we are, or I am, that, they didn't, kind of turn go a little bit better than they have so far.
And, Coach, staying in the SEC, you got Georgia got beat pretty soundly by LSU on Saturday. It was their first really true test of the season. They've got Florida coming up in a couple of weeks. How do you feel about the Bulldogs? Is this a team that can rebound and, get back on track and get themselves back in a playoff picture? Or is this really a team that benefited from a weaker early schedule and they're kind of young, got a lot of freshmen and sophomores? Is this a team that might be a year or two away?
No, I really do think that, they still got everything in front of them. And I think, that was a wake-up call for a lot of them. You could talk about how we got to be better and we got to work harder and we got to do things. But until you, have that happen to you, and certainly was an embarrassing, the way they lost to LSU. And, that's not the first team that's gone in there and got beat at LSU, that's for sure. But, I think they got everything in front of them, and sometimes like this is a wake-up call, and, I think Kirby Smart does a great job of getting these guys back on track.
Bob, questions for Coach?
It's always a pleasure to speak with you, Coach, and thanks for coming on again. And Chris had mentioned you had played baseball back in the day, and I was just wondering, Coach, back in the 60s and when you went on to coach and play, et cetera, as far as did you follow baseball also at the time, and did you cross paths with a lot of baseball players, both down in Texas and in Atlanta?
Well, I did. I was very fortunate, in Dallas, played an awful lot of golf with Mickey Mantle, and, that was somebody that I kind of idolized, growing up and, playing baseball. And, so I was very fortunate to be friends with Mickey, and, was fortunate to be around, a lot of good athletes, period, in Dallas, when I was there.
And, Coach, speaking of good athletes, when you came in the league, the quarterback for those Cowboys was Don Meredith, and I think many people probably remember him, obviously, from Monday Night Football, and maybe don't really remember him as a quarterback. I go back just enough to probably just remember some of his career, but you look back on him, and obviously, as you know, the guy was a talented player and had a lot of guts. Talk more about him as a player and a teammate.
Oh, there's no question. He was a great teammate. Don never got the credit. If you look back now, and history kind of tells you it's very difficult to come in to where you're the quarterback of an expansion team. And that's what Don was. And, he overcame a lot of the struggles that they had early. And, I think Don could have still played, but, at the time he retired, he was a great leader. Was very talented. He was probably one of the first quarterbacks that I remember or played with that, could hurt you with his feet as well as his arm. And he had a great time. I mean, as funny as he was on Monday Night Football, that's exactly the way he was, at practice. When it was time to be serious, he could be serious, but, he loved to have fun at everything he was doing.
Coach, I want to get your thoughts on the Falcons. They're another team that people like us had in the mix to be in the Super Bowl, perhaps becoming the first team to have a home game at the Super Bowl, but struggling a little bit, particularly on defense. They've given up the most points in the league. Talk about the Falcons and their opportunity to right the ship the rest of the way.
Well, you never like to talk about injuries, but I think if you look around the league, and some of the teams that are struggling, that's one of the things that, coaches don't like to talk about and fans don't like to talk about it, but, they lost, two real key players in their safeties on defense. It is very difficult to replace, that position because they kind of are the ones that control the secondary and also, have to be, great tacklers coming up to stop the running game. And, so they just been, had a lot of injuries on defense. Their offense is, done well, but, defense is the thing that they've struggled with. And, they've lost some close games and, it didn't take just a little bit to separate teams now. And when you lose some key people like they have, I still think they've got a chance. It's going to have to be probably as a wild card because New Orleans has kind of run away with the division or got a big lead now, and there's still a lot of football to be played. But, I think they're still in contention when you look around the league and look at, who's in there as far as wild cards and, people that are 2 and 4 got an excellent chance.
And Coach, one of the things Bob and I were talking about at the top of the show is all the antics from Vontaze Burfict. He seems to us to be a guy who just doesn't get it, and it really isn't the kind of guy that is he's bad for the game, and for the league. And we hear so much about how the league and the NFL wants to make the game safer for players, yet this guy seems to be, headhunting and going out to injure guys week after week after week. And no matter if you spend him or you fine him, still continues to do the same sort of stuff. What's your thought? Are we off base? What do you think about what you're seeing from Burfict?
Well, I haven't seen a heck of a lot of it, but I certainly think that, the league is trying to make the game safer. It's always going to be a violent game, and certainly people that are, headhunting or whatever you want to call it, there's no place for it in the league. And that's the thing I don't understand, because, you're playing a sport that everybody you're competing with is trying to make a living doing the same thing. So why do you, try to be different? Play the game hard, play it fair. You don't have to do things that are dirty.
Bob, more for Coach?
And on that same topic, Coach, about the NFL and the hits on the quarterback, it seems like they're kind of over-policing it now. Now, you coached a franchise quarterback, Elway, and obviously you were on both sides of it. You know the value of a guy like that, but it seems like now you just hardly can touch the quarterback. It's a very fine line, Coach. I understand where the NFL is coming from, but it must be tough on the minds of opposing coaches these days.
Well, no question. I mean, just the how do you? It's a tough game, and you're talking about the helmet to helmet stuff. Sometimes that's a running back. I'm not going to keep my head up if I'm getting ready to be hit. I'm going to lower my head and try to protect myself. So I don't know the answer to it, but it's just very difficult to what is the word? To officiate that. It's very difficult to lay down what is good and what is bad, and you'd like to do this and you'd like to do that, but I just think the quarterback handles the ball on every single play, but very seldom does he not touch the ball on offense, and that ball attracts the wrong kind of people.
And Coach, after 20-something years coaching in the league, I mean, you had a 14-win team in Atlanta, you had a 13-win team in Denver, so many double-digit victory teams. Is there one team that stood out of all of them that you thought was the most talented?
Oh, gosh. You really tested my memory. I can't remember yesterday, and you asked me all the way back there. So, gosh, I think, when we overcame the game for our first Super Bowl when I was in Denver, that was always special. To be on the road and win the way we did to get to our first Super Bowl, playing against Cleveland, that was a big win for us, and something I'll always remember. The game against Minnesota when I was coaching here in Atlanta, playing on the road and such a hostile environment and winning the way we did, in that game to go to the Super Bowl. Those are, some of the things that stick out. But, gosh, through so many years, being fortunate enough to have a quarterback like John Elway and winning over 100 games with him as a quarterback, you couldn't be more fortunate to have something like that.
And, Coach, you played in the same era with guys like Dick Butkus and Ray Nitschke, Deacon Jones, Alan Page, Joe Green, and to Bob's earlier point, the rules were so much different back then. But I'm curious to get your memories. What was it like being a running back trying to play against guys like those?
Well, you mentioned all the bad ones. It wasn't any fun at all. Those guys were tough. The thing about it from a running back standpoint, if your offensive line or your teammates don't block somebody, those guys are tough to handle. And you mentioned all of the good ones, the Butkus, the Nitschkes, Mean Joe Green. Gosh, I mean, the list that you mentioned, you're talking about some of the best that ever played the game, and that's something that makes it fun to compete against. But those are some tough guys to go against.
And Coach, I want to get your thoughts now on the Cowboys as you look at your former team. Big win last Sunday over the Jaguars. The NFC East looks like a division that, boy, the champion out of that division could be someone that ends up 9-7. Cowboys got the Redskins this weekend. I want to get your memories of the Cowboy-Redskin rivalry and then your assessment of the NFC East.
Of course, that was when both teams became competitive. That was the big rivalry. Washington became good. We were playing well. Those are two big games every year, and that's a big rivalry. And I think it always will be as long as that teams are playing well. Certainly, that's the case right now.
And Coach, one more before we let you go. When we talk to so many of the former players here on the show, and it seems like there's always a game. They seem to remember the bad stuff more than they remember the good stuff. I wanted to get your thoughts from you. Like, is there a game that you enjoy looking back on that still makes you smile, and is there one that still bothers you?
Well, there's a lot of them that bother me. Looking back on, certainly I think in 1966 when I had my best year as a player, that was a great year for me because I having been a quarterback in high school and college, and now I was a starting running back for the Cowboys and scored 16 touchdowns, and we ended up going to a championship game and losing to Green Bay for the right to go to Super Bowl I. Those are memories that I certainly can look back on and feel good about.
Coach, before we let you go, remind our listeners how they can stay up to date with the things that you continue to do, listen to you on radio, and perhaps catching up with you, whether it's on social media or it's online.
Well, I'm on a radio show here the day of the game on 680 The Fan, a local radio station here, and covering the Falcons, and the day after the game to talk about that. So it keeps me busy watching the Falcons and keeping up with them.
Well, Coach, we can't thank you enough for taking time out of your night to come back and be a part of the show. It's always such a privilege for Bob and I to get to spend some time with you. We hope you'll come back later on in the season and share more of your stories and insights with us.
Well, you bet. Anytime, guys. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming on, Coach.
Take care, Coach. All the best to you and your family. That is former head coach Dan Reeves. Bob, and you said it best at the top. Boy, it's just such an honor and a privilege to get to spend some time with him.
Yeah, because it's such a wild, fascinating career, Chris. Player, coach, executive, he's done it all. And the guys he played with, the guys he's coached. And, again, people forget how good a player he was and versatile and what an athlete. And we can go on and on and on. And it's always good to talk to him because we never run out of things to talk about.
All right, we've got our next guest, Tony Collins, hanging on the line. We'll get to Tony on the other side of this quick station break.
You're listening to Thursday Night Tailgate with Chris Mascaro and Bob Lazari, where NFL legends live on. Back to you, boys.
Here means a lot.
And now back with us here on Thursday Night Tailgate in his regular weekly time slot is former Patriots Pro Bowl running back Tony Collins. Hey, Tony, how are you tonight?
Good evening, Tony.
Doing fantastic. How you doing, Chris and Bob?
Great, Tony.
Always really good, especially when you're ready to join us, Tony. And I got to tell you, looking back at last week, everybody had a really great week, but one of us went undefeated because one of us correctly picked the Eagles over the Giants, and the other two did not. And that someone was me. So the race is getting tighter now, Tony. Our overall record's looking pretty good. Everyone's starting to bunch together. So, look out, Tony. I'm starting to come for you, my friend. So, looking back at last week, review it really quickly. We all correctly picked the Steelers over the Bengals, the Rams over the Broncos, the Ravens over the Titans, and the Patriots over the Chiefs. So, you guys were 4-1. I was 5-0. So for the season, Tony, you got a one-game lead over both me and Bob. You're 16-8-1, and Bob and I are 15-9-1. So we're one game back. I'm out of the cellar, so I'm feeling a little bit better about myself. Things are starting to look up. So, looking forward now to the rest of the season, but we all know there's a lot of games left to go. So let's talk about this week, Tony. And we're going to start by looking at your Patriots, your 4-2 Patriots, they go to the 3-2 Bears. Patriots a 2.5-point road favorite there in the over/under 49. So, Tony, your thoughts? Is this the week you finally pick against your Patriots?
Are you serious right now? Hey, and because you said that, the score is going to be 37-14, New England.
Wow! So we start right out of the gate with the Tony Collins blowout special. All right, Bob, what do you think?
I still like the Patriots too, Chris. I think they're just gelling, and as long as Gronkowski stays fairly healthy, he's not complaining about not getting the ball as much because they got all these weapons we talked about last week, and it's scary how good they can be. Gordon keeps his head on straight and continues to do what he's doing. He's only going to get better, and he's going to get more involved in the offense. It's scary. There's no way that team, and I don't care, you can tell me all you want about the Bears defense, New England can hang 38 points on anyone. And I think Tony's not going to be far off with the 30. I'm going to say 35-24 New England.
All right. And, I'm with you guys. I have a hard time believing the Bears could pull this off. I get that the Bears are third in the giveaway-takeaway ratio at a +6. I get that their defense is fourth in, rushing yards allowed, and Mitch Trubisky is the seventh-rated passer in the league, by the way. But I refuse to believe that Trubisky can beat the Patriots. As bad as the Patriots' defense is, and they are bad, they're 21st against the pass, 18th against the run, and they're giving up nearly 25 points per game. And all that, you would think, sort of starts to point as a closer game for the Bears. But remember, the Bears gave up 31 points to the Dolphins, who had Brock Osweiler as the starting quarterback last week. And now you're going to bring Tom Brady to town? So there's that. I'm taking the Patriots. I think it's going to be a little less scoring, but I'm taking the Patriots 27-17. Second game this week, Tone, 3-2-1 Vikings go to the 3-3 Jets. The Vikings are a 3.5-point road favorite. The over/under here is 46. Tony, can Sam Darnold get the Jets a fourth victory?
I don't think so. I think the Vikings defense is going to be too much. They're going to put too much pressure on the young kid. I think the Minnesota Vikings right now are really gelling a little bit. I think they're going to pull off maybe 3 or 4 straight wins. So I'm going with the Vikings. But in a close game because the Jets are playing at home, we'll go 27-24 Minnesota.
All right. Bob, what do you think?
I agree with Tony. I think it's going to be a close game, and I like Minnesota just to come out maybe a little on top. They're very evenly matched if you look at the points versus points against. It's a fascinating matchup. Two teams you don't see play often. I think Minnesota is going to take control of that division, Chris. I really think they're going to win this game. I'm going to say it's pretty close. The Jets continue to give their fans something to cheer about. How about Minnesota 28-24?
Okay. And guys, you look at Sam Darnold last week, 24 of 30, 280 yards, 2 touchdowns and interception. Now, it was against the Colts, and the Colts are not a great defense. The Vikings aren't who they were last year either. 19th against the pass, allowing 267 yards passing a game, tied for 18th with Tony's Patriots, and average points allowed at a shade under 25. The key to the game to me, guys, for the Jets is don't make Sam Darnold have to throw the ball 30 times or more. 3-0 when he passes it less than 30 times in a game. Jets defense playing well. Bob, you alluded to this a moment ago. Tied for second in the league, 10 interceptions. They forced 9 fumbles. They're third in passes defended. So they're getting their hands on the ball. Now, the opposite side of that is Kirk Cousins, right? He isn't turning the ball over hardly at all. 12 touchdowns, 3 picks, 5th in passing yards. So, my keys to this game are, first of all, Dalvin Cook is supposed to be back. He and his hamstring are supposed to be ready to go this week. And I think the game rides on his availability. Plus, the Vikings, mixing up some coverages. Sam Darnold got a lot of, man-on-man last week against the Colts. But I think it's going to be a close game, but I'm going to go with you guys. I'll take the Vikes on the road 27-20. Third game this week is the 4-1 Saints going to the 4-2 Ravens. The Ravens are a 2.5-point home favorite. Over under is 50. So, Tony, who comes away with a win here?
Well, it's going to be a tough game, man. New Orleans is playing well offensively. But, Ravens, I love their defense. I don't know how many sacks they had last week. And I think they're going to put some pressure on Drew. 11. I think they're going to put a little pressure on Drew. I like the Ravens offense. So I'm going to go with the Ravens in a close game. We'll go, and I'm thinking Well, it may be a lot of scoring, but then again, it may be not with the defense. So we'll go 28-27. Ravens pull it out with a field goal.
Wow. All right. Bob, who do you like?
I think Tony made some good points. I mean, it's a good matchup. I mean, as much as I like Breeze and the Saints, and you could almost see Breeze down a few points with the ball in the fourth quarter here, it's going to be that kind of game. And like Tony said, the Baltimore defense, if they can stop Breeze, they're going to be pretty good and tough the rest of the year. I think this is one of the few remaining losses for the Saints. Somehow Baltimore at home pulls it out. Probably a little ugly, 23-17.
All right. And guys, like you guys have mentioned, the Ravens continue to dominate on defense. Like I mentioned a moment ago, 11 sacks on Marcus Mariota last week. And I know they're facing Drew Brees and a Saints offense that has scored the most offensive points this season, but the Ravens have given up the fewest offensive points as well. So it's going to be one of those sort of classic matchups. But you guys hear me say all the time, defense wins championships and it wins games too. And highest scoring offenses just don't. The wild card, of course, is always Oh No Joe, right? You know he's going to throw the ball to the Saints a couple of times in this game. And if the Ravens defense can hold those possession to field goals, I think they win. The Ravens have held 5 of their 6 opponents to 14 or fewer points this season. They haven't allowed a second half touchdown all season. So I'm going to be with you guys. I'm taking the Ravens. I think they win a close one, 24-20. Fourth game is a 3-2 Panthers going to the 3-3 Eagles. The Eagles are a 4.5-point home favorite. Over under is 45. So Tony, can the defending champs get a big home win this weekend?
You know what? I'm a Cam Newton fan. I watched the game last week. He had an opportunity to win that game, and he's just not. I don't think he's that clutch quarterback that he needs to be. I mean, he's almost there, but he's not there. And them going into Philly with those crazy Philly fans, I'm seeing Philly winning this game 34-21. Going with Philly.
Bob, who do you like?
Yeah, I'm with Tony again. I mean, I think Philadelphia is sick of being known as just a 500 team. Like Tony says, I'm not a big Newton fan. I mean, he's got a lot of talent, obviously, but hasn't shown the clutchness that they need. There's something missing there. I think they come into Philly. It's going to be a tough environment. Let's say Philly gets it looking good this week and they win 30-20.
And you guys know how I feel about Cam Newton, most overrated player in the league. He's 25th in passing yards, 14th in completion percentage, 16th in passer rating, 9 touchdowns to 4 interceptions, and they're the 25th rated passing offense. He's good, if he's got a clean pocket, but when there's any pressure, he starts, throwing off his back foot, throwing it to the other team. The strength of the Panthers is their running game. They're 4th in average yards rushing per game at 139.4, but the Eagles are the number 2 rated defense against the rush. They're allowing a shade under 80 a game. Eagles defense, 18 sacks. Panthers defense, 8. Next to last in the league. So I think Wentz is going to get some time. I think he's going to pick them apart. They're at home. So I'm going with the Eagles, 27-24. Our last game is the 3-3 Texans going to a humbled 3-3 Jaguars team. The Jags are a 5-point home favorite. Over under is 41.5. So Tony, someone's going home from this game under 500. Who's it going to be?
The Jaguars gave up, I think, 40 points against the Cowboys.
Right.
And, they're supposed to have this great defense, man, and I'm not seeing it. And their offense, their offense is not doing anything. So I got to go with the Texans, but it's going to be a low-scoring game. Texans pull it out, beating the Jacksonville Jaguars down in Jacksonville, 17-14. Texans.
Okay. Bob, who do you like?
Well, it should be a tough game, division rivalry here. A lot of questions about both teams. Jacksonville, again, like you mentioned, Chris, they gave up a third of their season total to Dallas. That was crazy, but I think they're sick of hearing it. I think their defense gets back on track, and they just can't go under 500. I can't see it. I'm going to say Jacksonville wins this game 24-21.
Guys, to me, the Jaguars are getting a heaping helping of humble pie. The Jags defense boasted about being the best in the league, and they were going to go undefeated. And Jalen Ramsey proclaimed himself the best defensive back in the game. And then, like you guys mentioned, Cowboys come in, hang 40 on them. They're the 22nd. The Jags are the 22nd ranked defense against the run. And Cole Beasley had 9 catches for 101 yards and 2 touchdowns. Cole Beasley did that. Cowboys rushed for 209 yards against them. Doesn't sound like an elite-level defense to me. Now, in come the Texans, coming off a tough win over the Bills, who have a really good defense themselves, and I think it's going to be a very similar game to what we saw between the Texans and the Bills. Deshaun Watson has got to limit the turnovers. He's thrown 7 so far this season, thrown at least 1 pick in 8 straight games, threw 2 last week, plus had a fumble. So he's got to take care of the ball, right? Now, unfortunately for him, the Texans' tackles have given up the most pressures in the league, so he's kind of running for his life back there a lot. But I'm with you guys. I think that, don't expect a lot of offense. Jacksonville doesn't have much going for it offensively. No Leonard Fournette again this weekend, it looks like. TJ Yeldon is banged up, and you got Blake Bortles, right? And he's never going to win a game for you. He's a 28th ranked passer in the league, 9 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. So I think the Texans also come out. I'm with you, Tony. I think they get the win. I think it's 20-17. Tony, before we let you go, remind our listeners about the great things you do helping kids go to college.
TonyCollinsFoundation.org. Go to the website, helping kids go off to college as many as we can and every year.
You're the best, Tone. Take care. All the best to you and your family. We look forward to catching up with you again next week.
Take care, Tony.
You guys have a great week. God bless you guys.
See you, man.
See you, Tony. That is former Patriots Pro Bowl running back Tony Collins. We've got our next guest, Liffort Hobley, hanging on the line. We're going to get to Liffort right on the other side of this quick station break.
Thursday Night Tailgate, where the spotlight is always on the positive. Tune in Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time to hear your favorite NFL legends, players, and coaches sharing their stories. Now back to Chris and Bob.
I wouldn't joke about anything else that happens here tonight.
And now back with us here on Thursday Night Tailgate is former Dolphins defensive back Liffort Hobley. Let me remind you about Liffort's background. He's from Shreveport, Louisiana, played his college ball at LSU, where he was a 4-year letterman and named All-SEC back in 1983 and 84. He remains in their top 10 for career interceptions with 10. He was a third-round draft pick by the Pittsburgh Steelers in 1985, and he played in the NFL from 85 to 93 for the Rams and the Dolphins. Over the course of his career, he had 5 interceptions, recovered 8 fumbles, and returned 2 of them for touchdowns. And we're excited that he is back with us again tonight here on Thursday Night Tailgate. Hey, Liffort, Chris and Bob here. Thanks for coming back on the show.
Welcome back.
Hey guys. How you doing, Chris? How you doing, Bob?
Doing great. Thank you.
Fantastic. Liffort, how have you been, my friend?
I'm doing great, guys. Doing great.
So, Liffort, I want to start our time with you tonight by going back to your time at LSU. And as I was looking back over the schedule and some of the games that you got to be a part of there, 1982 had to be a crazy season for you and your teammates. You guys started out unranked that year. You come in, you beat number 4 Florida in week 3. You beat number 8 Alabama in Florida in week 3, Alabama in week 8. You beat number 7 Florida State in week 10. And then, unfortunately, lose 3 of your last 4 games to unranked teams. It had to be an incredible season of highs and lows. What do you remember about 82?
I tell you what, it was an interesting year. And, one of those years where you actually are playing really good teams. And then, of course, you make it down to the back part of your schedule and you get caught, looking ahead. Past Mississippi State, and for some apparent reason, they had our number every year. And just one of those years where you don't expect to lose a game, but unfortunately, in the SEC, playing against an SEC team, it can happen at any time. As you can see, Florida LSU in Gainesville just a couple of weeks ago, unexpected, but hey, it's the SEC.
Liffort, the Orange Bowl at the end of that 82 season, you guys faced off against Nebraska, another crazy game. You guys on defense, you forced 6 turnovers. You did a great job of containing Turner Gill and Mike Rozier, who would go on to win the Heisman Trophy the following season. Unfortunately, it goes Nebraska's way by 1. What do you remember about being a part of that Orange Bowl game?
That was a great, I tell you what, there was a lot of great players in that field that night. Basically, I think there's a couple of things where we actually faltered in the special team side. Basically not taking care of field position when we had the opportunities. And then, of course, defensively, I think we played well enough to win. When you hold a team like that to, 20, 21 points, and then, of course, you basically make some foolish mistakes here and there and don't get off the field when you really need to get off and get the offense the ball back. that's the kind of game it was that night. They were doing some of the same things that we were doing. There was a few opportunities on their end, a few opportunities on our end where we didn't capitalize and control the football. And then, like I said, when you're in a position to get out off the field on third in certain situations, you need to get off the field. But it was a well-played game. It was one of those games where, there was guys up front played well. Their guys up front played well. And, unfortunately, it's one of those, the outcome was based on, not the points, but who actually got an opportunity to keep the ball. I think they had the ball a little bit more than we did.
Liffort, I want to get your thoughts on this year's team. Huge win last Saturday over Georgia. LSU is now 6-1, ranked number 5 in the country. You mentioned Mississippi State. You got Mississippi State coming up. You got Alabama in the next 2 weeks. So give me your thoughts. How do you feel about LSU the rest of the way?
Well, I've watched LSU since the spring. Adding Joe Burrows to the roster, which was kind of interesting, but it's worked out for him. He's managed really well coming in this spring, basically after the spring and getting there to get a lot of things under his belt throughout the summer, and then getting into two-a-days and basically working hard and obtaining he's worked and proved his worth. In addition to that, our offense hasn't actually shown all of the things that they can actually do yet. And of course, our defense has actually manned up and played really well from day one, coming here to Dallas and playing University of Miami and playing lights out football. I think we're still on the edge where we're still, basically working with a lot of young players that are just getting started. And now they actually know each other, this year. There's a few guys that are actually, been there for a year or two, but now that I think these guys actually know how good they are and they can play with anybody. Last week's game was kind of just what I thought. When you bring a team into a situation and you match up really well against them, especially our defense, I thought they played, phenomenal. I think at certain times they actually, kind of laid back and, let Georgia run the football on them a little bit in the middle. And I think those are the things that they're being corrected today, where other teams are going to look at those things and try and do the same thing. As far as the edge, if you're trying to get the ball outside, there's so much speed there, you're just not going to have a chance against LSU running to the edge. But, if you have an athletic quarterback and a couple of really good running backs, Mississippi State does, and targeting just to get those players shut down. And I think our secondary is second to none, like always.
5 questions for Liffort.
It's great to have you back on the show, Liffort. And I like to talk to any former athlete we have here, any former professional athlete, and take them back to their younger days, Liffort, and see what people in their lives were most responsible for the athlete's professional success. Maybe you want to mention some people that you owe a lot of gratitude to getting you where you were professionally.
Starting young. I mean, even at a grade school level, I had professional athletes in my life that were responsible for keeping me on the straight and narrow. My junior high school coach played at LSU, played a little professional football. Dale Sandifer, my high school coach, played for the San Francisco 49ers. Jerry Burden. So I had people in my life that actually have been there years way before I have. And to watch others that actually came out of my hometown prior to me actually even thinking about playing professional football or doing anything else other than just being a young man. Growing up in Shreveport, there was always a plethora of former or NFL players that I idolized, from Terry Bradshaw to Larry Anderson to Roland Harper, guys that played way before me, Joe Ferguson. All of those guys grew up in the same area I grew up in, and it was awesome to see. And then, of course, to have a machine right down just about 35 miles north of Shreveport that produced unbelievable talent and a ton of NFL athletes out of the Grambling State program. So there were so many things to watch and so many players to actually idolize. It was just one of those things where you're actually, if you weren't watching that, you were definitely not paying attention.
And Liffort, having spent 6 of your 7 professional seasons in Miami, I wanted to get your overall impressions of Miami as a sports town, a place to live. Talk to us about the entire Miami experience.
I tell you what, the Miami environment, there are so many things to do from there. The Dolphin fans are the Dolphin fans. I watch games. I've played in games where you walk out and you look in the stands and people are either at the game or they're going to watch it at home, or they're actually on South Beach, or they're in the Keys. They're doing things. There are so many things to do in Miami. It's just one of those towns. It could be a great sports town, or it could be just the town where people actually live to live. They don't hold on to one sport or another. Now there's baseball there. Then, of course, there's basketball. And then, of course, there's hockey. So unless there's an opportunity or a great team coming to town, the Dolphins, I don't think, have ever sold out annually consistently for many years. When back in the 70s, when the Dolphins were unbelievably lights out football team, in the Orange Bowl, the place rocked. To establish the venue in Miami, in that area north of where the stadium was before, it kind of changed, I believe, the atmosphere of the Miami Dolphins a little bit. And not to take anything from what's there now, but that Orange Bowl atmosphere was madness. And I think everyone saw that on national TV every time the Dolphins played under Don Shula back from the 60s to the 70s, where you had a perfect season, where the expectations are always high. And then, of course, those expectations are still that of what the history of Don Shula actually performed and did with the players back in his era. And at this point in time, I think there's opportunity for young coaches like that are in place now to take some of those things and actually move forward. And, I hear a lot of things. I see a lot of things going on in the Miami group as far as the coaches and players. And sometimes I see a lack of respect for players. I see that same thing from the coaching staff. So it's something that you can't actually put together a winning team in the media, and certain things shouldn't be talked about as far as what's going on internally with players, and they should never be put on the spot by a coach or anyone else to say, hey, go ask the player what's going on. That's a responsibility of the organization to keep those things in-house. And I think as far as Miami, they are doing really well. I think they have a good nucleus of players. They have a good group of elderly statesmen that are actually, basically helping to help these young guys mature a little bit and understand how the game's actually played and what they should expect.
Liffort, I want to go back to your time at LSU for a minute, looking over some of the rosters of the guys that you got to play with. A couple jumped out at me right away, in Dalton Hilliard and Eric Martin. What do you remember about those guys?
I tell you what, Eric Martin, first of all, came to LSU as a running back. He had so much talent. He could basically do anything, and Eric Martin probably could have played on both sides of the football. He was one of those athletes that basically took the role and was told, hey, look, would you move to wide receiver? Didn't blink, moved to wide receiver, and became one of the best wide receivers, not only in college football, but in the NFL. And just had so much talent and could actually, the guy, you would think he was a 4.4 guy, but he probably ran 4.6 at best. If you ever got him the ball in open field, it seems like he was a 4.3 guy. He was just one of those guys that carried his pass really well, ran great routes, and had the largest hands you've ever seen, and would catch anything, anytime, anywhere, and was physically strong as a 6'3 receiver. And, of course, Dalton Hilliard, he was one of those unbelievable, phenomenal talents that you wanted that guy on your team. And once you saw him in action, basically making people miss and had that low center of gravity, like an Earl Campbell with the giant thighs, and could run through you or run by you, and just was phenomenal. And both awesome men and, just wonderful friends.
When we posted about tonight's show, a good friend of ours and obviously a good friend of yours, Wendell Davis, made some wonderful comments about you. Talk about your relationship with Wendell.
He's another one that, basically you get guys that, you trust, coaches would trust and say, hey, I got a player for you to take out this weekend. I was one of those guys that actually got to take out Dalton Hilliard on his visit. I got to take out Eric Martin on his visit. And, of course, Wendell Davis growing up in Shreveport, I got to take out Wendell Davis on his visit to LSU. And you could see in those guys that, hey, these guys are definitely coming here. They're going to play here. And and just from what I've actually noticed from Wendell, he walked right in, and you could tell first day of practice, wow, this kid's going to be awesome. We have a great addition, and it just worked really well. We had, basically Jeff Wickersham as a quarterback, and he could throw the football. He could put it in the air. So we had a great team. It's just that we were I would imagine, just a couple of plays away from actually focusing and winning a national championship with a great group of players, not only with that defense and also with the unbelievable offensive talent we had.
Bob Moore for Liffort?
Yeah, Liffort, I was wondering, as far as at the NFL level, who are some of the defensive backs either before you got into the league, while you were in the league, and perhaps even since, that you really thought were shutdown kind of guys, really talented guys, really guys that you loved watching play?
Growing up, you watching guys like Lester Hayes, Mike Haynes, the Raiders. You watch, basically guys, when they got in the NFL before you, the Jeff Fullers and the Ronnie Lotts, and, guys that actually, just stuck out like a sore thumb when you watched them play because they actually played the game. Gary Fensick, the guys like that actually were sharp. Watching the Dolphins play and Lyle Blackwood and Glenn Blackwood. And then you get to meet these guys. Some of them are actually, you go, wow, that guy's kind of small, but he packed a really big punch. So, and then of course you really find out that how talented they are and how smart they are about the game itself. And that's what impressed me once I got to that level. Guys like that, how they could dissect an offense in certain situations, down and distance, where the team lines up where the team's located on the field. Tendencies were unbelievably thought of when we played when we actually worked together. So those things were actually so important. I'm not sure if, today that the players are actually pay attention to those little small details. But man, those guys really, really, just like the quarterbacks, work hard. We spent countless hours watching tapes and films, and I'm sure guys before me, I learned those things from those type of players.
And that was my final question, Liffort. I mean, you've been out of the league 25 years. When you came in, besides size-wise, what's the main difference, do you think, between the defensive backs coming into the league now and the ones that came in when you were there?
The guys came in when I was there. Things have changed. I think guys have actually pushed back a little bit because of the league rules of what you can and cannot do. We actually executed people back then. We hit you. And those things weren't allowed. I don't think the concussion protocol actually, that kind of changed the game slightly. The style of tackling back when we played in the early 70s, 80s, 90s is a little bit different than what I see today. Guys tackle basically, we hit and wrapped, and it was actually more shoulder to just kind of knock down shoulder type of tackling today. I would like to see a lot more form tackling and guys actually taking care of themselves in that manner. You can actually still have a punishing hit without basically using headgear. I see a lot of headgear collisions today versus there were a lot of headgear collisions back when we played. But for some apparent reason, I know things will never change. That helmet, regardless of how much of an investment you make, I see, there's an opportunity there. The helmet, I think, will not change the game. I think just basically structuring the way guys tackle and how they take care of themselves. that actually should be the focus of how players approach the game every day. And I think those are things you learn at a really, really young age, growing up as a kid, how to take on a running back or a receiver and basically still stop him from making an inch or even gaining an additional yard.
Liffort, before we let you go, remind our listeners, how can they stay up to date with what you're doing now, whether that's online or it's on social media?
Oh, my goodness. You'll see a lot of coming up next week because I'm actually going to be in an online web chat talking with NFL coming up through a program through the NFL alumni. I'm the chapter president here. I got the first opportunity to launch our platform for NFL alumni this coming up next week. I'll be available to actually let's talk to and chat with fans all over the country about their teams. If they're interested in having a conversation, I could hear Tony and the guys talking about scores and who's going to beat who this weekend. So they'll be able to basically live chat with me in the next week or so on a webcast opportunity that I have available through the NFL alumni corporate. So we're working hard to get all other players involved in that manner as well. I think it's going to be an unbelievable program for people to have the opportunity to basically live chat with former NFL players and have built relationships with them around the country. And I think it's a great opportunity that the NFL alumni corporate has given us, our national, to basically have a platform and a voice to keep the players actively involved in the National Football League in that manner, and also keep the fans hot on what's going on around the NFL and what we're doing as well. And this is going to be, I think, and not this Sunday, but the following Sunday. You'll see it on my Twitter page. You'll see it on the NFL alumni page that I'm a part of, and my own personal NFL alumni page as well. Then, of course, you'll also be able to tap into my LinkedIn and get the link and all of those different social media venues. You can sign up and log in and be a part of my Sunday.
Well, Liffort, thank you so much for taking time out of your night to come back and be a part of the show. It's always a lot of fun having you here. We look forward to catching up with you again real soon.
You got it, guys. Thank you very much. I thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on.
Take care, Liffort. All the best to you and your family, my friend.
Guys. You got it. Thank you so much.
That is former LSU and Miami Dolphins defensive back Liffort Hobley. We've got our next guest, Tony Mandarich, hanging on the line. We're going to get to Tony on the other side of this real quick station break.
Hear your favorite NFL legends sharing their stories and insights every week, right here on Thursday Night Tailgate with Chris Mascaro and Bob Lazari. Take it away, guys.
There's no way out.
And now back with us here on Thursday Night Tailgate is Tony Mandarich. Let me remind you about Tony's background. He is from Oakville, Ontario. He is the highest drafted Canadian-born player in NFL history. He was recruited to play his college ball at Michigan State by then defensive backs coach Nick Saban. He was a first-team All-American, an Outland Trophy finalist, and a two-time Big Ten Lineman of the Year. He was a first-round draft pick, the number 2 overall selection in the 1989 draft by the Green Bay Packers, and he played for the Packers from 89 to 92. Packers released him after the 82 season, left the game for a few years doing some rehab, returned to the NFL in 1996, and he played for the Indianapolis Colts, through the 1998 season, and started all 16 games back in 1997. Tony now runs Tony Mandarich Creatives, which he's a wonderful digital artist, photographer, and public speaker. Folks, I highly encourage you to go on TonyMandarich.com to take a look at some of Tony's work. It is absolutely spectacular, and we are honored he is back with us again tonight here on Thursday Night Tailgate. Good evening, Tony. Chris and Bob here. Thanks for coming back on the show.
Tony.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me, guys.
So, Tony, I think everyone believes they know your story, but I think only a few people really know all of the details. And I think that we've been given so much stuff by mainstream media about you and your background, but I don't think people really know the real Tony Mandarich story, from your parents being Yugoslavian immigrants coming to this country, to the steroid and painkiller addiction that you had to overcome, to coming back and playing 3 pretty darn good years with the Colts that happened on the other side of what you call 4 years in hell in your book. And like I say, now you're just an absolutely spectacular photographer and the things that you are doing today. So if you don't mind, what do you want people to know about Tony Mandarich now?
That's a great question. And before I answer that, you had mentioned Nick Saban earlier, and he did pretty good in his career. He did all right after he left Michigan State.
He did.
7 national championships. So who would have thought? I mean, it's always interesting to watch people, coaches, players, that you played with, and then, 10, 15, 20, 30 years later, you look at the careers and you go, who would have thought? Like Jeff Saturday, for example, who was a center for the Colts and was an All-Pro for multiple years, the 3rd string center my last year in Indianapolis, and at times he was on the practice squad. So then to go on and win Super Bowls, become the starter, become an All-Pro, it's such a cool thing to see happen and to see happen in a person's life. But, in regards to your question, I'd say 80% of me is no different than anybody else. It's, I mean, I have a lot of the same interests that people do, a lot of the same, stuff that you're interested in. But I would say, and I'm just throwing out the number 80-20, there's 20% of me that has a voice in my head. And sometimes that voice is a scary voice. And it's like, it's almost a voice of accountability. And, there's times where there's things that I've done in my life and do in my life that are extreme. And, I don't look at them as extreme though. I look at them as, if I'm at the studio shooting or if I'm doing a test shoot, it's not a paid job. It's just, I get a model, whether it's a male or female, we kind of collaborate. We say, hey, this is over like a week period. We say, hey, let's shoot this, this, and this. Let me test this kind of stuff, and we'll see if we can develop some kind of a, interesting look. And basically what it becomes is another tool in the toolbox, which makes you more valuable as far as you bring more value to the client that does pay you. When I'm doing that stuff, I mean, some of that stuff's extreme, and almost all of it comes from the core of my life experience. And, I've had some tremendous highs and I've had some tumultuous lows, and I feel lucky that I have. I've played in Green Bay, if you want to call it played. I was in Green Bay, totally a train wreck, and then, pretty much kicked out of football for 3 years. It got worse, and then got, sober March 23rd of 95. 11 months later, I was even lucky to get an opportunity that anybody would even work out. Philly offered me one. I had a great workout with Philly, and then Indianapolis heard, through the grapevine about the workout. They offered me a workout, and Indianapolis wanted to sign me, right then and there. And this was like 11 months after being sober, and I thought to myself, 11 months prior to that, I couldn't get off the couch because I was so messed up and doped up on painkillers. And, it was just, and I had tried, honest to God, I had tried hundreds, and I'm not exaggerating, at least in the upper hundreds, almost 1,000 different ways to get sober. Tricking myself into this, tricking myself into that, just playing little games, of, okay, I won't do this and I won't do that. Or if I do this drug, I won't do this drug because this will be okay. And all it is rationalization, and it's a disease playing tricks on you. And, obviously the solution is, you're not going to get drunk if you don't put the bottles in your mouth. And you're not going to get, that high from painkillers if you don't swallow the pills. So that's first and foremost. Then, there's a saying, if you have a drunk horse thief and you sober him up, what do you have? You still have a horse thief. He's just sober, that's all. So you have to change as a person. You have to change who you're hanging out with. You have to change, all these. If you don't, you're going to go back. Eventually, you're probably going to go back to drinking or drugging or doing things and acting the way you used to act, because the way I acted when I was drinking and drugging, to me, was, ugly. It was pathetic. And I can, unfortunately, I could still act that way sober. It's just a matter of keeping myself in check. And, 12 steps, everybody hears about 12-step programs. All the 12 steps are 12 tools. They're just 12 sentences or 12 tools that say, hey, just follow these directions. And this is what's going to get you sober or keep you sober. And basically, in paraphrasing the 12 steps, it's basically right living. It's doing the right thing as a human being. You don't have to be an alcoholic. It's just doing the right thing. Help your neighbor, do stuff. If you screw somebody over, pick up the phone or go see that person and say, hey, you know what? I did you wrong today. You probably don't know it, but this is what I did. I was wrong for doing it. And I just want, to say I was wrong for doing it. And that, when I started to do that, that was like an awakening of, oh my God, I'm changing. Because I used to be the guy that had all the answers, not just for me, but I also had the answers for you. When I started to realize that I don't have all the answers for people or myself, the funny, there's a funny story. In fifth day of treatment in Brighton, Michigan, we're in a counselor's running this meeting of like 12 of us, and we're all newbies. And she says, before we start, and she was, very well educated and, very professional, very knowledgeable, very good. And she says, before we start, I just want you all to know that your best thinking and your best planning got you to this room right here today. And I thought to myself, oh my God, she's right.
Wow.
And, it's kind of like a baseball bat across the face, right? Because it's like, she's right. She's exactly right. That vision of that, I'm going to build this grandiose empire and I'm going to, be the next this or that. And here I am sitting in a treatment center of all places, Detroit, Michigan. And you talk about a dose of humble pie and humility, and then being like, you know what? I know there's a God and I'm not it. And I need to start listening instead of start talking, and instead of continue talking, and start soaking some of this stuff in, because my best thinking almost got me killed. So I'm just a normal guy. I'm just a normal guy that takes things to extremes, except now I don't get, luckily, I could have been pulled over many times for DUI and stuff. I just never got caught back then when I used to drink. But today, you don't get pulled over for drinking too much Red Bull. You know what I'm saying? You don't get pulled over for drinking too much Diet Coke or whatever the case may be. So 80% of me is no different than anybody else. 20% of me, I would say, and that's just a number I'm throwing out, the minority of me that I'm talking about that's different. And that difference doesn't make me any better than anybody, and it doesn't make me any worse than anybody. It makes me me. And it makes me who I am and kind of how I'm wired and things like that. And I kind of refer to it as the dark side. That's the dark side of me. Now, if you can take that dark side, and if you can harness it correctly, and if you can turn those vices into virtues, you can use it as a tool that will help millions of people. And, the thing that you have to be very careful of is, and it's obvious, the story's out there. At one time, I used it as a tool it was all about me. It was me, what's in it for me. My favorite topic is me, what about me? And it wasn't about, I don't care about anybody else. What about me? What am I getting out of this? And, when sobriety and the miracle of sobriety happened, that paradigm shift happened of, no, it's not about me anymore. It's about what can I do for them, and them being everybody. And that doesn't mean just people in 12-step programs. It means everybody, like anybody I pass on the street. And it's like, I don't go around, I don't want to, convey the impression of that, I'm going around helping every single person I see. It's just like, but if somebody needs help with something, and if I can do it, I'm going to do it, because I can't tell you how many people helped me, and I can't tell you how many people tried to help me. It's one of those things, the disease of alcoholism and drug addiction is an ugly, ugly disease, and it's a terminal disease, and it doesn't discriminate. And the greatest thing about that disease, though, is it's the only disease that exists that when it's tempered and tamed, never cured, but just in remission, you end up being a better human being than you probably were before you ever got to that point of that out of control drinking, where you can't probably do that with cancer. You can't do that with, all these other diseases. You can get healthy and live another 30, 40 years, but there's a part of you that will never be the same because of a disease like that, where in the disease of alcoholism, I almost feel fortunate that it's open. Like, I was at death's door many times, and, back then, it was scary. It's scary now because it's like, it's waiting for me. All I have to do is pick up a drink and I'm off and running. And it's like, because, and I think part of that is, I think, people that are extremists, if you will, and I'm talking about extremists in taking things to extremes with, like one of the things I take to extremes is if I'm going to do something, and it could be, whether it's photography, whether it's football, whether it's, doesn't matter what it is. It could be something, minor, very like, something's entertainment, I want to take it to the extreme. I want to do it. I want to be the best at it. And if I can't be the best at it, I want to be the best that I could be at it, like for me personally. So I would say most people don't think that way. And I don't consciously think that way. It just happens. It's just natural for me to think that way. It's like, why would you want to not be the best at something? And I don't want that to sound arrogant. It's just one of those things that I've been like that since I can consciously remember since I was 10, 11 years old. Why would I not want to be the best soccer player on the team? And why would I not want to be the best, if I was playing goalie, why would I want to be the best goalie on the soccer team or the best forward or whatever the case may be? And this is, and getting into some personal life stuff, because this is where it's a very fine line that can become very detrimental. And, one of my biggest mistakes in sobriety, is, I took things to extremes, and a lot of those extremes worked for my benefit. It brought me back to football. It kept me, it kept me humble and made me keep my mouth shut and, try to, close the door and close the chapter on that football career as best as I could. I don't think there were some things that just couldn't be corrected, but, I slayed the demons that I needed to slay. And then it was, kind of like next. What's next? Like, what's next on the list to do? And, and you do and you do and you do. But here was my biggest problem, my biggest mistake. I expected that out of my kids. I felt, and both my kids are beautiful girls, 27 and 20. And I expected that out of them because I was like, everybody's like this. Like that's, it was like my naiveness was, especially if it's somebody that's your daughter, like directly blood related, you're wired like this. It's like, you're not out there to get a participation ribbon. You're out there to kick some, what. And as long as you leave nothing on the plate and give it your all, before you even step on the field, if you've prepared and everything, you've already won internally. And if you lose the game by score, you've won because you've prepared, you've done everything in that's possible in your ability, whether it's watching film, in my instance, it was watching film, weightlifting, running, doing treatment, getting, your body, taking care of your body, making sure you go over the playbook, making sure you're on the same page with the offensive line and the center and Peyton Manning and Marshall Faulk and all these guys, because, and that was your job. And when you did, and when you were prepared and Sunday came, you stepped on that field, there was no nervousness because you were prepared. And when I stepped on that field and I was nervous, I would ask myself, what did I not do enough of this last week to prepare for this? But so and then, kind of bringing this back to my kids, I expected my kids to be like, my daughter is a phenomenal graphic designer and an extremely good photographer in Colorado now. And she travels, the whole country doing travel photography. And it's like, don't you want to be the best graphic designer? And don't you want to be like the best travel photographer? And, I asked her, what's like your dream job? And she's like, well, it'd be awesome to work for freelance for like a Nat Geo or Discovery or Channel or something that is just, they fly you wherever and you're just a freelancer and you spend 4 weeks in the mountains trying to shoot some leopard or goat that you rarely see and do nature photography. Like, that's her dream. And I'm like, well, then let's make a plan and execute it. Because, the cemetery is full of great dreams that were not executed because there was no action taken. So, I'm the type of guy that'll pull out the whiteboard and say, okay, here's where you are today. And how do we get to where you want to be? And then, of course, she has the fear that I have and the same fear that I would say probably 99.9% of everybody has. If you're on salary with a company and you do this, that means you're going to have to leave that job. And now you don't have that so-called imaginary security of salary. So we write the pros, we write the cons, we write the solutions, and then we look at all the options. And then it becomes down to now only you can make the decision. I don't want to give you advice. I can share my experiences with you and what I did that worked and what I did that didn't work. But the one part of my girls that is like me is that rebellious, don't tell me what to do. You can ask me the same thing you tell me, and I will bend over backwards and do it to the best of my ability. If you just say, hey, it'd be huge if you could do this for me, and I'd really appreciate it, I will go, so out of my way to help somebody. And I know a lot of people listening to this will relate to this. It's not you guys yourselves. But then you have somebody on the delivery say, you need to do this. I'll do the opposite. I'll do the opposite just to prove to them that they don't have control of me. And, that I'm my own person and, I will do it. And then, unfortunately, those decisions, to be right instead of to be happy have hurt me. In the long run have ended up being, you want it to be right more than you want it to be, happy. And, but the best part about it is, even though you make mistakes, just because you get sober doesn't mean you don't make mistakes. You make mistakes, but you're aware of them. And you have now the option and the choice and some tools to do something about it if you choose to, or continue to make the same mistakes, which would be, unfortunate because making the same mistakes when you're a train wreck is one thing, because I don't want to say you have an excuse, but you're a train wreck. You don't know up from down and everything's blurry. But when you're sober, you have clear eyes, got conscious thought, and you're willing to bounce things off people that you respect, that have no emotional attachment to your situation, and say, am I wrong in this? Am I right in this? How do you see this? And there's a handful, less than 3 or 4 people that I go to, things like this. And half the time, they're like, you're wrong about this. You're way out of line about this. And those are really your true friends that will be willing to tell you stuff like that and that aren't like, what I would call a yes man. And because they care about you enough about your well-being and your family's well-being and your kids' well-being, where they'll say, hey, look, I know you're not going to get mad at me. I know you're not going to, be pissed off at me or not talk to me anymore. But I'm telling you what I see and what I hear. And from what I see and hear, you're way off base. So is that a short enough answer?
It's a heck of an answer. It's a great answer. And I appreciate you providing it. Unfortunately, there's so many other things that we wanted to talk to you about tonight, Tony, and that's not to say that what you just said isn't fantastic, because it absolutely is. What I hope that we have an opportunity is to catch up with you again sometime soon, because you're fantastic, and we'd sure like to get your insights and thoughts on some other things as well.
Anytime you guys want your ears to bleed for me talking, you just give me a call.
We will do that.
We will absolutely do that.
But yeah, no, it's a privilege. Listen, it's a privilege to be on your show and for you guys, and sometimes obviously can get a little bit long-winded, and I think it's because I'm passionate about what I talk about, and if I don't talk about it, I'm not passionate, and it'll be a yes/no answer.
It was great listening to everything you just said, and I'm sure you got a lot more great stories and insights to tell us, and we'd sure like to hear every one of them. So we hope you'll come back and join us again soon, Tony.
I absolutely will. If you guys want, just give me a shout. I'd absolutely be honored to. And if I was long-winded, I apologize. And
nothing to apologize for.
Hopefully the green and white boots tomorrow.
Thanks so much, Tony, for your time and your insights. We look forward to having you back on the show real soon.
All right, guys. Have a great night.
Good night.
Take care, Tony.
Bye-bye.
A lot to digest there, Bob, but great insights from Tony Mandarich, and a guy that I think is largely misunderstood, and I think the media has been largely unfair too, but it was really great hearing his insights there, and we got to get him back on real soon.
I hope we will. It's the stuff movies are made out of, and books and everything, and he's some fascinating guy.
All right, now joining us here on Thursday Night Tailgate is Carmen Fanzone. Let me give you some background on Carmen. He is from Detroit, Michigan, played his college ball at Ferris State University and later Central Michigan. Was signed as an amateur free agent by the Boston Red Sox in 1964. Made his major league debut with the Red Sox on July 21st, 1970, and got hit by a pitch in his very first plate appearance. Sort of welcome to the majors, Rook. His first major league hit was a double in a game against the Milwaukee Brewers, who were in the American League back then. And wouldn't it be something if the Red Sox ended up playing the Brewers in the World Series this year, and knock on wood. Carmen played in the major leagues from 1970 to 74 for the Red Sox and the Cubs. During his playing days with the Cubs, he once played the Star-Spangled Banner at Wrigley Field on his flugelhorn, and after his playing days went on to become a wonderful jazz musician. And we are honored and really appreciate the fact that he was patient with us tonight here on Thursday Night Tailgate. Hi, Carmen, Chris, and Bob. Thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, Carmen.
Hi, Chris and Bob. Nice to be here, and I enjoyed the last 10 minutes with Tony Mandarich. I didn't know who it was until you introduced him at the end, but it was very interesting for sure.
So, Carmen, I want to start by going back to your time with the Red Sox. You came up in July of 1970s. You came to a team that had a lot of young talent, guys like Tony C. and George Scott and Yaz and our friend Rico Petrocelli, all members of that team. I'm curious to get your memories. What was it like being around those guys?
Well, it was different. It was bittersweet. When I first got there, I was having a decent year in Louisville, and Billy Gardner was my manager, we were playing in Montreal at that point, and he called me in and said, I think the Red Sox are going to call you up. I said, they are? You know, we had just played a doubleheader, and I think I had a home run in each game. And at that point, I think I was leading the International League or tied for the International League in home runs. And it was almost, at that point, I felt the same way as when it was time to graduate college. You know, I wasn't a great student, but I just kept taking classes, and you get to a point where it's time to graduate, and it's like, I'm going to graduate, you know, and I felt the same way when the Red Sox called me up. So I was happy, but I didn't know what to expect. So when I got to Boston, and it was, I guess, in July of '70, they didn't have a roster spot for me. So I had to wait a day or two. And while I was watching the game in the stands, George Scott, who was playing third base at that point, broke his wrist. And I'm thinking to myself, boy, this is the way they write scripts. You know, you get called up and then the third baseman breaks his wrist. Maybe I'll get a chance to play a little bit. And the way it worked out, it didn't work out that way. It seemed like everything that could go wrong went wrong. And was it Chris? Were you the one that gave all the details up front? Because
Yes, sir. I sure was.
Yeah, okay, Chris and Bob, and I've talked to Bob in the past, but hello to both of you. But yeah, when I got there, my first appearance in the big leagues with Boston, I got hit on the funny bone, actually, and we were playing California, and I think it was Bob. I can't think of, you should be able to think of his name, but I can't think of it now. Anyway, I was on first base and I was getting dizzy because I got hit on the funny bone, so I had to be replaced for a pinch runner at that point. And then the next day, Gary Peters is pitching and we're winning, I think 6-0 in about the 6th or 7th inning. And Eddie Casco was my manager, and he was my manager the year before at Louisville. And of course, that was a kind of like an abbreviated season for me, and that was in '69. And I played a couple weeks and I had back problems. I had back problems in spring training, missed most of spring training. And then I opened up the season and I played a couple weeks, and we were in Buffalo, and I think I had hit a couple home runs on Saturday. And then on Sunday, we got rained out of Buffalo, so we flew back to Louisville. I couldn't get off the plane. My back acted up again, and I could hardly get off the plane. So for the next 20 days, I spent in traction in one of the Louisville hospitals. Ended up, the traction didn't work, and they finally sent me to Boston, and they operated on my back. So really, Eddie Casco only got to see me for about 2 weeks. So he didn't really know what to expect. And when I got called up for the Red Sox, he was the manager, but I think the reason that I was called up was that Pete Gammons wrote an article about me in the Boston, whatever paper he wrote, for the Boston Globe or whatever, and said, you know, what is with this Carmen Fanzone? He's been in the system for a number of years. He's had some decent years, and nobody knows anything about him. You know, how come, you know, we haven't seen him? So shortly after that, the Red Sox called me up, and I think Casco, even though Casco was kind of like a utility infielder in his own right, didn't like the fact that he didn't have anything to do with me being called up. So he really didn't go out of his way and never very rarely spoke to me. So after pinch hitting and being taken out for a pinch runner the night before, on Saturday, we're leading, I think, 6 or 7-0. Gary Peters is pitching, and about the 7th inning, he says, you're playing third base next inning. So I go out to third base, and Jim Fragosi's the first hitter. And as luck or not luck would have it, he hits a ball to me at third. And I go to field it, and it bounces off my knee, and I go to pick it up, and I throw it in the right field. Now Fragosi's on second base. And the public address announcer says, air third base twice. So on the first pitch of my experience, you know, in playing defense in the big leagues, I make 2 errors. And Fenway Park, a lot like Wrigley Field, they're very small ballparks. And then it's not like it is today. You know, you can't get a ticket in either place today, but back then there were a lot of empty seats. So you could hear just about everybody that had an opinion, you could hear them. And I remember just very, very distinctly somebody saying, we waited 7 years for this, and after that, there was nothing that I could do that was positive. It was just awful. The couple months I spent there was just everything that could go wrong went wrong. So I didn't really get a chance to play. They played Kennedy. I can't think of his first name now. But he was a utility infielder just like myself. But he played John Kennedy. I think it was John Kennedy. He played third base most of the time. And I got, I think, 15 at-bats in I think, 2 months that I was there. So it wasn't a very happy time for me. And I was just happy for that year to end. And then I went to play winter ball in the Dominican Republic, and then I found out that winter that I got traded for another utility infielder. now I'm having another blank. He was with Chicago, and we got traded. 2 Italian utility infielders got traded for one another. But my time in Boston really wasn't very successful and very happy. And when I think about it to this day, I still have sleepless nights.
Well, Carm, it's great to speak with you again. You were very kind to join us for years on the television side, and now we're honored to have you on the radio, and appreciate the friendship over the years. It's been a lot of fun. But
oh, it's my pleasure. My pleasure.
We've always talked, Carm, about your transition to Chicago and that first manager, Leo DeRocher, baseball legend and everything. Your impressions of him as far as a baseball man?
Well, the fact that he had been in baseball for so many years, it was just he was a great baseball man, unquestionably. He was a great player, and he was a great coach. He was a great manager. He spent so many years in baseball, but by the time I got to him, in 71 when I came up from AAA in Tacoma, I was there the last month, and then I spent half of 72 with him before he got fired at the All-Star break. He spent most of the time in the dugout. He spent most of the time with a blanket over his legs. He wasn't very animated. He only knew really the 8 guys on the field. He really didn't know anybody else. So being an extra man with Leo DeRocher wasn't the best possible situation. When I first, I don't know, I probably told you this before, Bob, but my first at bat with the Cubs in the end of 71, I had driven to Chicago from Detroit because I asked them to, when I got called up from Toronto or Tacoma, I said, can I go back to Detroit and get my car and then drive to Chicago? And they said, sure. So I'm driving to Chicago, and I get lost. I miss my flight. I called the traveling secretary, Blake Cullen. I said, Blake, I missed my flight. Do you still want me to come? Because the team is coming home tonight from Pittsburgh. So he says, Sano's not feeling good, and Leo may need you. Just take the next available flight. Get here when you get here. So I take the next flight. I get into Pittsburgh about 8 o'clock. The game starts at 8. By the time I get a cab and get to the ballpark, and get a uniform, it's like the 3rd or 4th inning. I just get into the dugout, and I'm just physically so tired, because I had driven from Detroit, and it was a real hot day, and I had a 67 Chevy with no air, and it was it wasn't a fun day for me. So I'm sitting in the dugout, and this is the year of 71 that the Pirates win the World Series. So Steve Blass is pitching this one particular day, and Milt Pappas is pitching for us, and I think we're getting beat about 9-0. Anyway, about the 8th or 9th inning, Leo looks down the dugout. He says, "Hey, you, grab a bat." And that "hey, you" was me. So I grab a bat, I go up, and the first pitch to me, Steve Blass throws me a slider for a strike, and he throws me another pitch, a fastball, and I swing at it. I hit a fly ball to left field, and I'm running to first base, and I'm thinking to myself, well, at least I didn't embarrass myself. At least I hit the ball. So I'm rounding first base, and I'm looking out, and Willie Stargell's in left, and Gene Kleins is in center, and they go back to the wall, and the ball goes over the fence. So now I've hit a home run in my first at-bat in the National League after just no success at all in the American League, and just everything that could go wrong went wrong with Boston. So I get to home plate, and Don Kessinger was there to greet me, and of course he knew what I had done, and everybody in the dugout knew what I had done, but of course when you're getting beat 9-0 in the big leagues, you can't really jump up and down and celebrate. So I'm just sitting in the dugout and just knowing that I did as much as I could do, but at least it was better than embarrassing myself. So after the game, we get on the bus to go back to the airport. And there was a couple extra guys that came up from AAA with myself. And there was only one seat left on the bus. And Joe Pepitone and myself were standing with no seat. And, Joe Pepitone being Pepitone, he was like just screaming, this is the big leagues. We should have a bigger bus. We should have 2 buses. There shouldn't be we shouldn't have to stand and all this stuff. And the only seat left is next to DeRocher. Because, there's always the manager sits in the first row. And usually nobody sits with him. They let him sit by himself. So at that point, he says, "Carmen, come sit by me. Come sit with me." So all of a sudden now I'm Leo's boy. So, he sits down. He says, can you play anywhere else but third base? He said, we're going to get you in the lineup. I said, well, I played some first. I played a little second. And so the next day was an off day, and then we go back to Chicago, and we have a weekend series with St. Louis. So the first 2 days, I think Jerry Royce is pitching one day and Carlton's pitching the next day, so I get to play. And I don't know if I went 1 for 4 or I didn't embarrass myself. And then the following day, I think there was a right-hander, so I sat, but for a couple of days, I was Leo's boy. But he forgot my name very quickly, but it was kind of interesting, and being around him, he was, like I said, he was a great baseball man, and he had a great career, but by the time I got to him, he wasn't very animated, unless, if the game was the game of the week, then he was like, he was really a showman enough. He was sitting, was standing and playing catch outside the dugout with kids, and so that everybody could see that he was really, into everything. So he was definitely showbiz.
Well, Carmen, it sure has been a delight having you as part of the show tonight. We'd love to spend some more time with you sometime. We hope you'll come back and join us again sometime.
Anytime you ask, I'm available.
Take care.
We appreciate that very much. Take care, Carmen. All the best to you and your lovely wife. We look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Bob and Chris, thank you for inviting me. It was a pleasure.
Anytime, Carmen.
All right.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Carmen.
Bye.
That is Carmen Fanzone, former Red Sox and Chicago Cubs infielder. Bob, an interesting guy, and certainly I'm sure we haven't even gotten to the tip of all his great stories.
Yeah, how he met his wife is pretty fascinating. And you mentioned his job. He still works. He's very active, Chris, in the musicians union out there. That's what he basically does for a living. And but yeah, his wife, incredibly talented. He'll be the first to say she's the real musician in that family. But taking away nothing from him, the guy was incredibly accomplished. Just fascinating. I was a young kid and watching this guy play a national anthem, and then putting his glove on and going out to second base. I said, this is something that you don't see every day. It always stayed with me, and that's how I got contacted with him probably about 10 years ago. Pretty great guy, and we keep in touch all the time.
All right, when Bob and I come back, we'll be turning on our Thursday Night Tailgate Spotlight on the positive here, which players are out there doing great things in their communities. We'll do that on the other side of this real quick station break.
Thursday Night Tailgate, where the spotlight is always on the positive. Tune in Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time to hear your favorite NFL legends, players, and coaches sharing their stories. Now back to Chris and Bob.
I wouldn't joke about anything else that happened to you tonight.
All right, we are turning on our spotlight on the positive here on Thursday Night Tailgate. Bob, who you putting your spotlight on this week?
Oh, Chris, I have a great story here. I'm going to put a little spin on it, but there was this wedding that took place last week in Detroit, okay? And it was a guy named Matt Sheffer. He marries a girl named Katie, so they become Matt and Katie Sheffer, Chris, and they're both humongous Detroit Lions fans, okay? So, and they had their wedding reception, Chris, was an entire Lions theme. I mean, they had pom-poms, they had rally towels. They came out and broke a banner to come out into the reception. It was something. They have highlights at the Lions website. You got to check this out. So these people are getting married, right? And then all of a sudden it comes time for them to be toasted. And Rob, who is a cousin of the bride, he had secretly reached out to the Detroit Lions and told the Lions how big of fans these people were, how they were having this themed wedding. And so who comes out? He's able to get a hold of the Lions, and he actually gets a hold of a couple of the cheerleaders, girls named Caroline and Tiana, and the team mascot, Chris. So can you imagine? So they're surprised the bride and groom. The cheerleaders come out. The mascot of the Lions comes out, and it's just everyone's going crazy, right? And all of a sudden, the cheerleaders actually they give the two bride and groom, they give them sideline passes and dream seats for the game against the Packers just a couple weeks ago, and they end up getting a $500 gift card that was given in courtesy from Meijer supermarkets out there. So this is all going on, and it's incredible. And at the end, the cheerleaders say, okay, not only is that happening, but everyone in this wedding, maybe 100 people, you're all going on and to the game against the Packers, courtesy of the Lions. And even Rob, the guy who organized all that, even he was not aware of all that, Chris. And all this is on video. You got to go to the website, DetroitLions.com, hit community. You'll see the Matt and Katie Sheffer wedding. It's incredible, and what they did for him. So I'm going to give a shout-out, again, to the Lions organization, those two cheerleaders, Carolina and Tiana. It was just a terrific story. It'll actually bring tears of joy if you watch this video, Chris. But I thought that was pretty cool, and the Lions did such a great thing, and they actually have interviews with both Rob and the bride and groom saying how they'll never forget such a special day. So kudos to the Lions this week.
Yes, indeed, kudos to the Lions. That's a heck of a story. Good for those folks. It seems like it's like one of those Oprah experiences, right? Everybody gets a, whatever, right? Everybody gets to go to the game. So that's fantastic. Great story, Bob. I'm putting my spotlight on Packers defensive back Ha Ha Clinton-Dix. And back in January, he started Ha Ha's Heroes. It's his new foundation. And HERO stands for Hope, Education, Resources, and Opportunity. Right? And the mission, when you think about what's the mission of the foundation, well, it's to provide economically challenged students with a voice of motivation, some empowerment, and encouragement so that they can grow and be heroes through academic achievement one day. And they can also develop, positive personal skills, make positive decisions, and overall really avoid the high-risk behavior that too many people get involved with. And one of the programs encourages kids, from kindergarten through grade 5 to read. They go into schools and they take previously unused spaces in schools and transform those areas into, space filled with bean bags and carpeting and chairs, and then they stock the area with 600 books so that the kids have a clean, comfortable environment to go read in. In May, he hosted an event called Flights and Bites, and he and 20 of his teammates put together a fun evening of mixing and mingling with more than 140 guests that were there. And in addition to meeting Clinton-Dix, the guests got, appetizers, small plates, beer flights, played cornhole with many of the Packers players, and had an opportunity to just sort of participate in an exciting, environment, and then, got to donate, whether they were going to make donations or participate in a live or a silent auction. The night raised almost $73,000 to support programs for his foundation, and all that's going back into the programs that supplied those resources that I mentioned a moment ago, that the kids need. So I want to throw out a big kudos to Ha Ha Clinton-Dix for creating a great program to support literacy, reading, and education. It's good job out of him, Bob, for finding a need, knowing what that need was, and then figuring out ways to raise the money to provide those resources for those kids. I thought it was a good story.
Yeah, kudos to you for getting that one. And there's a problem. The problem there is, Chris, I hadn't been aware of that. We don't read about things like that. And they're buried in the sports section if they're there at all. And that's why you and I make it a point of it to get these things out to the masses at the end of the show, not just to end the show on a good note, but these are the things that we should be reading about on a daily basis.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We always say it, right? These stories, for whatever reason, are never on page 1. They're always sort of hidden. If they're reported at all, it's in a small section on page 12. And it's one of the things we want to do is we want to bring those things out on the front table and make more people aware of them. You're right, Bob. These should be the lead stories. Unfortunately, they're not. All right, folks, it is time for us to put a bow on this edition of Thursday Night Tailgate. Want to send out our thanks again to Dan Reeves, Tony Collins, Liffort Hobley, Tony Mandarich, and Carmen Fanzone for listening, and a special hello to our good friend Carrie Glenn that's listening in as on the show tonight. And Bob, as always, thank you to you, my friend. It's what a great privilege to spend my Thursday nights doing this show alongside of you.
Same here, Chris. That was a lot of fun, and with the Red Sox game in the background, we're very good at multitasking. We've had a lot of practice, right?
Indeed. Next week, folks, scheduled to join us will be our good friend and former LSU and Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver and TNT guest Hall of Famer, Eddie Kennison. Always fantastic having Eddie as part of the show. Former Steelers kicker and another TNT guest Hall of Famer, Jeff Reed, will join us. Former Jets defensive back Burgess Owens will be making his TNT debut. Looking forward to talking with him. Former BC Lions defensive back Dante Marsh. Been a long overdue visit from Dante. It's been quite a while since we've had him on the show. He resides here in Atlanta, doing some good things, training young players. So look forward to catching up with Dante. And, of course, former Patriots running back Tony Collins will be back with us to go through our 5-star picks of the week. So already excited for next week's show. Want to remind everybody, how can you follow us on social media? Well, first on Facebook, we got a page for the show, Thursday Night Tailgate. Give us a like. That's very important to us. Plus, both Bob and I have our own Facebook pages as well. Please check out our website, ThursdayNightTailgate.com. On there, you'll be able to see who some of our future guests are going to be. Plus, we have links to stream, us as a podcast, linking back to our page over on Podbean, so you can, download, stream any of our archive episodes for free. And you download that Podbean app, you can take us with you on your mobile phone and stream us, whether you're in the grocery store, on your commute, in the gym, taking a walk, going for a run, whatever. You've got us right there, and you can listen to, like I say, any of our archive episodes for free. On Twitter, you can follow me at CT Mascaro. Bob is at Bob_Lazari, and the show is at TNT Podcast. Bob, take us home, my friend.
Okay, Chris, always a pleasure. We also want to thank our terrific announcer, Joe LaGenusa, for the great job he always does with our intro and ads. We want to send out also shout-outs to Kyle Turley and the Kyle Turley Band for the upcoming outro music. And on behalf of myself and Chris, we thank everyone out there tonight for listening. We appreciate you the most. And until next week, good night, Kevin, and good night, Terry. We miss you guys.